In this video, I'm going to be discussing the upcoming trip that the Chinese president will be taking to Russia that may very well end the war in Ukraine. On February 20th, Joe Biden made a spur-of-the-moment trip to Ukraine in order to reiterate American support of the country as well as grant an additional $500 million to be given to the Ukrainian war effort. On February 21st, it was announced that Chinese President Xi Jinping plans to visit Russia amidst growing tensions over the war. Analysts quickly began to theorize that the purpose of this trip will be to involve China in the conflict through supplying Russia with weapons, despite the fact that China has already spoken out against the conflict and in favor of a peaceful resolution. Is this the case? I believe that the purpose of Xi's trip is not to involve China in the Ukraine conflict, but instead to put it in a position as the one brokering peace while the US continually ramps up tensions. China's top diplomat Wang Yi has recently stated the country's concern about the heightening of tensions, and in a visit to the Munich Security Conference on February 20th, Wang Yi dug into American involvement in arms supplying in the Ukraine conflict, and attempted to drive a wedge between Europe and the US by iterating China's position of peace and America's nonchalant attitude towards the threat that the war poses to Europe and the world as a whole. In taking the role as the peaceful negotiator on the world stage, China would be taking one step forward in its goal of the Chinese century. A video I'll be working on in the future will be about Chinese foreign investment, but in short, China's foreign investment and development practices are distinct from those of states such as the US, if for no other reason than because it is really good PR. Similarly, in trying to supplant US power, if China can demonstrate that in the face of conflict it chooses to take a more peaceful and diplomatic route, while the current hegemon, the US, uses it as an opportunity to stoke the flames for its own benefit, this turns into a great opportunity to turn the world's favorability towards themselves. What a peace deal would look like isn't certain, but I suspect it would develop in one of two ways, depending on which country is actually winning on the ground. If the peace deal is to favor Russia, it will simply be that Russia maintains control of the territory that they have taken control of since 2014, that have all now been formally incorporated into the Russian Federation. On the flip side, if the deal is leaning more in Ukraine's favor, this still does not mean that they will have the total victory that many seem to think they will have. Instead, this version of a deal will likely result in a ceasefire and likely demilitarization of contested territories, during which there is a referendum deciding membership either between the Russian Federation or Ukraine for these regions. At this moment in time, I don't believe that Ukraine would go for this, especially with the amount of aid they are currently receiving from NATO powers. Eventually, however, due to economic factors or political changes in European states and America, I think that this aid will dry up at some point, at which Ukraine will have a very limited window in which they can negotiate a peace deal. In short, regarding Xi's planned trip to Russia, I think we'll see China pushing to lead a peace negotiation in order to assert itself as a preferable diplomatic leader on the world stage. If this is the case, the question then becomes, will China's bid be successful? In order to answer this question, we need to look deeper into the economic situation in Russia and the rest of the globe in the current moment. This situation is one marked by challenges to US economic power as BRICS expands and states move away from the dollar to conduct trade. Without getting too into the details, for those unaware, BRICS is an organization made up by 5 of the world's leading emerging economies that encourages trade between member states and also operates its own development bank in order to expand its reach globally. With a slew of nations stating an interest in joining BRICS, many of whom are regional powerhouses and emerging economies such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Indonesia, Iran, Turkey, and Venezuela, this organization's potential to rival G7 is growing daily, it seems. And with the sanctions placed on Russia since the beginning of its war with Ukraine, the move away from the dollar that BRICS member states and their trade partners have had to go through have only strengthened their national currencies and opened up a real discourse about the creation of a BRICS reserve currency. While I don't want to focus too much on this proposed BRICS reserve currency, largely because I don't think it will happen, and if it does, I don't know if it will be able to surpass the surge in usage the yuan has seen in the past year, it is worth noting just because of how much it signals that BRICS is coalescing and its member states are becoming more self-sufficient. Regardless, if the conflict in Ukraine continues alongside sanctions imposed by Russia, I don't know how long the US economy can stand strong before the ramifications catch up to America and its partners. Europe especially is in a precarious situation because of its physical proximity to the war and Europe's reliance on Russian goods. It is important to note, however, that the US is definitely benefiting from the war through sales to the Ukrainian military, so I think that the US can stand against this attrition far more than European states can. I think America's leaders are especially attentive to this situation, and this is why the escalation of tensions in the past week has occurred. The only scenarios in which America wins in this conflict are a Russian withdrawal or a complete escalation into a war between NATO and Russia, in which case America's leaders are banking on a nuclear exchange not occurring, as unlikely as that may be. By continually upping the stakes and providing unlimited resources to Ukraine, the cause of a Russian withdrawal becomes ever more likely, and this is exactly what America's leaders want. Despite this, a year into the conflict, it doesn't seem likely that Russia will pull out of the country anytime soon, and for now we'll just have to deal with escalating tensions between these powers. So that's all for this topic. When Xi makes his visit to Moscow, we'll see how this plays out and there will be more to talk about then, but for now we'll just have to deal with the seeming lack of an end to the Ukraine conflict. Please remember to like this video and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.